Good afternoon, Lyceum students. My name is Selden Baldwin, and today I'm going to be telling you about Chapter 7, Hansel D. and Gretel Dumb in Thomas C. Foster's book, How to Read Literature Like a Professor. So the main takeaway I gained from Chapter 7 was that the most effective way for an author to establish depth and sophistication in their writing is to expand off of well-known and familiar text to help the reader establish connections and see underlying themes clear. And so let me just go ahead and give you an example of that. So say you have two kids, they're going through life, they're making some wrong choices, they don't have a lot of parental supervision, and eventually they end up in jail. Well, this is a pretty similar plot to Hansel and Gretel, where there's two kids, they make some wrong choices, and they end up in the witch's oven. If you kind of dissect it without looking at the characters, both stories have two kids, both stories have lack of parental supervision, and both stories end up in some place that they don't want to be. It helps you to build connections and see themes a lot more clearly. So let's go right into some chapter summary. So one thing Foster does pretty well throughout this chapter is that he attacks it from the point of view of a writer and not necessarily that of a reader. And so he gives us an example. So say you have your story and you're trying to build some depth and some knowledge onto it. So typically in the older days, people would go to the literary canon to find a common source that all readers, a common source of literature that all readers are pretty familiar with. But nowadays, since readers do not use the literary canon as often, it makes it a little harder on writers. And so while they're thinking about a body of common knowledge that all readers know, they often come back to kiddie fairy tales because everyone has at least some experience with them. And so what they do is they try to create messages in relatable themes. And so, for example, like that last example I gave you, they use similar plots based off of fairy tales, but they have significant differences along the way. And so it's the reader's job to see that these plots are similar and build the connections that help them better understand the meaning and the themes that the author is trying to convey. So continuing on with chapter summary, one thing that a lot of authors do is they'll use small references, and these small references can completely change the meaning of the writing. So let's go with another example. Say you have two kids, they go into an abandoned hotel, they're exploring it, it's dark, it's creepy. So you're already thinking, all right, maybe there's some ghosts, some paranormal stuff. And then all of a sudden a bat comes flying across the screen. Now, even though this is a pretty small sign, it automatically changes how you're viewing the story. It's no longer paranormal and ghost. It's now vampires and a creepy abandoned hotel. And so these connections are not always going to be super obvious to see. For example, that bat, if you miss on the bat and just think it's just to scare you, you're not going to pick up as easily. And so it's the reader's job to really dissect stories and look at them from a more wholesome view to understand the plot and see these connections. And so we'll do one of those examples on the next page. So looking for familiar themes in different plots. For example, say you're watching Liam Neeson's Taken, and you get to the point, the daughter's kidnapped, Liam Neeson's doing everything he can to get her back, and a light bulb goes off your head, and you're like, wow, this is exactly like Finding Nemo. And so even though the plots are completely different, it's the reader's job to really look at it from a more wholesome view. And so in this case, both two kids kidnapped and both two dads doing everything they can to get their kids back. It'll change the way you view, for example, in this Taken, because you already have prior knowledge and experiences with the themes and meaning of Finding Nemo that you can now apply to Taken, and it'll force you to revisit the plot leading up to that point in the movie. And so borrowing text from kiddie fairy tales obviously creates significant irony, because if you're going to use Finding Nemo, which is about cartoon clownfish for little kids, and you're going to use that exact same plot but change it into kidnapping and murder, it's kind of interesting that you can use these to talk about just kind of a delusioned and often pretty gory reality that we face. And so the example that I wanted to show y'all about use of literature in modern stories is Kong Skull Island plays off of Beauty and the Beast. And so while these plots are pretty different, if you look at them from a more wholesome view, let's just go and just dissect it. So both stories have a beast. Both stories have a princess. In Beauty and the Beast, it is the princess. In Kong Skull Island, it's the community of villagers that the beast is protecting from the underground serpent monster things. And then in both stories, you have an angry mob of people trying to kill the beast. And Beauty and the Beast, it being the angry mob that wants to save the princess. And in Kong Skull Island, it is the army that wants to kill Kong to save the villagers there. But the themes that the author is trying to convey here is that it's not always the beast that is the actual problem in the story, and often it's humankind or the mob that really is the problem. And so it's really just important that you look for these connections and realize that authors are always trying to help the reader establish themes and see deeper meaning. And so you just got to be paying attention and look for the small cues that they're giving you. And you got to be able and willing to back up, take a look, and dissect stories from a wider view. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me. I'm happy to answer them. But otherwise, thank you for your time.